Have you ever come across this idea? It sounds like something straight out of a novel, maybe a Vatican thriller.
Which idea is that?
The one that suggests Pope Francis,
Well,
well, that he might actually be the last pope.
right.
Yeah.
That one. It definitely makes you pause, doesn't it? It sort of touches on those big end of days feelings people sometimes have.
Exactly. And that's pretty much where we're heading today. Our mission really is to explore these, really old prophecies, Nostradamus, St. Malachy, and see how they line up or maybe clash with what's happening at the Vatican right now.
Mm-hmm. Especially considering all the challenges the church is facing today. It's a fascinating intersection.
It really is. We're looking at how these ancient texts, maybe mystical, maybe not, bump up against the real-world problems of a massive global institution here in the 21st century.
Right. Ancient words, modern anxieties.
So let's kick off with Nostradamus. He's probably the more famous name for many people. 16th century French guy, wasn't he? Physician, astrologer.
Right.
Quite the resume.
He certainly wore many hats. And yeah, he's famous for the Prophecies, sometimes called the Centuries, this collection of these four-line poems, quatrains.
And they're written in this mix of Old French, Latin, Greek. Sounds intentionally confusing, published way back in 1555.
That's the thing. They're incredibly ambiguous. Deliberately so, it seems. No clear dates, very symbolic language.
Which is why, people are always finding connections after the fact, right? Oh, this quatrain predicted Napoleon, or this one's about World War II.
Exactly. It's like a historical Rorschach test. You can kind of read anything into them if you squint hard enough.
Which is both why they've lasted so long and why they're so, questionable as actual predictions. If it fits everything, does it really predict anything specific?
That's the core issue for skeptics, definitely. Its strength is also its weakness, you could say.
So how does Nostradamus connect to the papacy then? Is there a specific verse people point to?
There is one quatrain that some interpret as referring to an aged pontiff, and his successor being somehow Roman.
Okay, aged pontiff. Pope Francis isn't young. And Roman, that sounds intriguing.
Well, yeah, with Francis's age, you can see why people might link it.
Yeah.
And the Roman part gets debated. It does mean literally Roman, or just leader of the Roman Catholic Church.
Oh, okay.
Or some point out that even though Francis is Argentinian, his family has Italian roots. So a sort of symbolic Roman connection.
Right. You see how flexible that is? It could mean a few different things. Which leads us nicely, I guess, to St. Malachy. His prophecies feel a bit more direct, maybe?
More specific, certainly, at least in format. So the story goes, Malachy was an Irish archbishop back in the 12th century. On a trip to Rome around 1139, he supposedly had this vision.
A vision of all future popes.
Apparently, yeah. From his time, maybe Celestine II, maybe Innocent II.
Yeah.
There's some debate right up to the very end. And this vision became a list of 112 short Latin phrases, like mottos.
Just 112? That's specific.
Very specific. Each motto supposedly characterizes a pope or their pontificate. And the very last one, number 112, is Petrus Romanus.
Peter the Roman. Okay, that sounds significant.
It does. And the prophecy attached to Petrus Romanus is pretty heavy stuff. It talks about him feeding his flock during Great Tribulation.
Tribulation? Okay.
And then says the city of 7 hills, that's Rome, no question, will be destroyed. And after that, the dreadful judge will judge his people.
Wow. So destruction of Rome, end of the church, maybe the world, that's intense.
Extremely intense. It points toward the last judgment, essentially.
Yeah.
So you can imagine when Jorge Mario Bergoglio was elected in 2013.
And took the name Francis, people immediately jumped on this.
Oh, absolutely. The speculation exploded. Could he be Peter the Roman?
What were the arguments, besides the end times feelings some might have had?
Well, for those who believe, the pieces seem to fit. He's not Italian, he's Argentinian, but his family name, Bergoglio, has Italian roots. There's the symbolic Roman link again,
Okay.
And then the name choice.
Frick.
Francis, after St. Francis of Assisi, whose father, well, his name was Pietro Bernardone.
Pietro.
Exactly, Peter. So for believers, you have Peter and you have Roman connections, all tied to the Pope mentioned in the final prophecy.
That is a striking set of connections, you have to admit, even if you're skeptical.
It's a compelling narrative, for sure. But, and this is a big but, we really need to look at this critically. Most historians, theologians, religious scholars, they have serious doubts.
Doubts about the whole thing, or just the interpretation.
About the authenticity and reliability of these prophecies themselves, especially Malachy's list.
Okay, let's get into the skepticism. What's the main issue with Malachy?
The timing. Big time. This list, supposedly from 1139. It wasn't actually published until 1595.
Wait, 1595, that's nearly 450 years later.
Exactly, 4.5 centuries. That massive gap makes historians very suspicious. Why would such an important prophecy stay hidden for so long?
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So what's the theory?
The strong theory is that it was created much later, maybe even in the late 16th century, right before it's published, possibly as a piece of propaganda, maybe to influence a papal election around that time, like Gregory IV case.
So it could have been faked to push a certain candidate.
That's a distinct possibility. It seems more likely than a 12th century text suddenly appearing out of nowhere 450 years later.
Okay, that's a pretty big historical red flag for Malachy. What about Nostradamus? We touched on the vagueness.
Yeah, that's the main thing with him. His quatrains are famously ambiguous, almost poetic. They're so general, full of symbols, that you can apply them to almost anything after the fact.
The Barnum effect you mentioned, like horoscopes.
Sort of, yeah. That tendency we have to see vague statements as personally relevant. Nostradamus is kind of the king of that in prophecy terms. His voices feel profound, but they lack concrete details.
Making them impossible to really disprove, I guess.
Pretty much. They're more like literary riddles than specific predictions.
So what does the Catholic Church itself say about all this? Do they believe Francis is Peter the Roman?
Oh, definitely not officially. The church is very cautious. Neither Nostradamus nor Malachy are part of official church teaching or tradition. Church leaders generally warn people against getting too caught up in apocalyptic predictions.
They see it as a distraction.
Essentially, yes, a distraction from faith, from the church's actual mission in the here and now, plus it can create unnecessary fear.
Yet these prophecies just keep popping up, don't they? Especially when things feel unstable.
They absolutely do. They seem to scratch an itch, a need for answers, for some kind of pattern or meaning, especially in chaotic times. They offer a simple narrative, even if it's a scary one.
It's like a human tendency to look for hidden clues.
Exactly. That fascination is powerful, regardless of whether the prophecies themselves hold any water.
Okay, let's bring this back to Pope Francis more directly. His papacy started, as you said, after Benedict VI's resignation, which was unusual in itself.
Highly unusual. Unprecedented in modern times, really. And Francis stepped in when the church was already dealing with some serious headwinds.
You mean the scandals?
That's a huge part of it, yes. The ongoing revelations about clergy sexual abuse, the criticism of how the church hierarchy handled it, that's cast a long shadow and continues to demand attention and reform.
And Francis has tried to address that, but it's complex.
Very. He's pushed for reforms, accountability, but there are critics on all sides. Some say it's not enough, not fast enough, others resist the changes. And alongside that, there are these clear ideological tensions within the church.
Yeah, you hear about that, the conservative versus progressive wings.
That's a simplified way to put it, but yes. You have those who support Francis's emphasis on mercy, inclusion, pastoral care, opening doors, perhaps. And then you have those where he's moving away from traditional doctrine, creating confusion.
On what kinds of issues?
Things like communion for divorced and remarried Catholics, the role of women, LGBTQ+ issues, climate change, and environmentalism. These are all areas where you see significant debate and sometimes sharp disagreement.
So if you're someone who believes in the prophecies, then all this turmoil, the scandals, the internal fighting, the debates, it can look an awful lot like that Great Tribulation Malachy mentioned.
Right. It fits the narrative of impending doom or massive change.
It can certainly be interpreted that way, but again, perspective is key. The church has been through crises before, major ones, schisms, reformations, wars.
It survived for 2,000 years, weathering incredible storms.
Exactly. So is this the final crisis or just another incredibly challenging chapter? History suggests the latter might be more likely, but the feeling of crisis is real for many.
There was also that Black Pope idea you mentioned earlier from Nostradamus interpretations.
Ah, yes. Some read Nostradamus as predicting a pope from Africa, hence black. But another interpretation connects black to the black robes worn by the Jesuits, the Society of Jesus. And Francis is the first Jesuit pope.
Precisely. So for prophecy watchers, that's another intriguing piece that seems to slot into place, adding more fuel to the idea that his papacy is somehow unique or foretold.
Even if the links are a bit, stretched sometimes.
Well, that's the nature of interpreting these vague texts. You find connections that fit the pattern you're looking for.
Why are we so drawn to these end-of-the-world scenarios, though? What's the psychology behind it?
It's likely deep-seated. Humans crave meaning, order, understanding. especially when the world feels chaotic or scary, like during pandemics, wars, big social shifts.
Prophecies offer a map, a sense of control.
Kind of. Even if the map leads to a scary place, it's still a map. It suggests there's a plan, a narrative unfolding, not just random chaos. It can provide a strange sort of comfort, or at least a
An
framework.
illusion of understanding, maybe.
Perhaps. These texts offer drama, finality, the promise that all the confusion will eventually resolve, even if it's through destruction. It's compelling stuff.
And the current state of the church, with Francis pushing boundaries on some topics, definitely feeds that feeling of being at a crossroads.
It creates a sense that things are happening, that history is turning a corner. That makes the apocalyptic narrative feel more relevant, more possible.
So inevitably, people start thinking about what comes after Francis, the next conclave.
Oh yeah, the speculation is already bubbling.
Yeah.
What kind of pope will the cardinals choose next? And how will that choice be immediately interpreted through the lens of prophecy?
It seems like almost any outcome could be made to fit, couldn't it?
That's the incredible flexibility or maybe slipperiness of these prophecies. If they elect a cardinal from Africa or Asia, the black pope theories will surge.
Right.
If they choose an older, more traditional European, well, that fits Nostradamus' aged pontiff, potentially. A young reformer. Maybe that fulfills a different interpretation about renewal after tribulation.
So the prophecies are basically unfalsifiable. They can always be twisted to fit.
In a way, yes. Their survival depends on that interpretive flexibility, not necessarily on being accurate predictors.
But the actual cardinals making the decision, they're thinking about more practical things, surely.
Absolutely. When the doors of the Sistine Chapel close, the cardinals will be weighing, very real-world factors. Who can best address secularization? Who can manage the church administration? Who understands the global complexities?
Theological stances, experience, where they're from.
All of that. Leadership qualities, communication skills, ability to unify or guide the church through its current challenges. It's a deeply serious process grounded in present realities.
But as soon as white smoke appears,
You can bet people will be scrambling to connect the new pope to Malachy or Nostradamus. It's almost become part of the modern ritual surrounding a papal election. Finding the signs, reading the tea leaves of prophecy.
it shows how much we want to find patterns, doesn't it?
It really does. Our deep need to connect events and create meaning.
So, back to the big question. Are we looking at some kind of epical break, the end of the line for a major institution, like the prophecies hint at? Or is this just another turn in the very long road of church history?
The prophecies definitely offer that dramatic end-of-story scenario. But as we've discussed, their credibility, their historical basis is shaky.
The vagueness, the timing issues.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean the challenges facing the church aren't real or profound. They absolutely are. The scandals, the divisions, secularism, technology, these are huge forces.
Could they force a fundamental change?
They certainly could, or they could be catalysts for adaptation and renewal, as crises have often been in the church's past. Maybe we can even read the prophecies metaphorically.
How so?
Well, maybe destruction of the city of Seven Hills isn't literal fire and brimstone, but symbolizes a radical transformation of the church's power structures or its presence in Rome.
And the last persecution.
Perhaps that represents an internal struggle, a painful process of purification in confronting past failures. The Last Judgment could be seen as the church having to reckon with its history and its future mission.
That's a less literal way to look at it, more symbolic.
And it fits with the church's history of surviving incredible upheavals. The fall of Rome, the Reformation, revolutions, world wars. It has shown remarkable resilience.
That history provides perspective, definitely, but doesn't guarantee anything about the future.
No guarantees. But it suggests that reports of the church's imminent demise might be, as they have been before, premature. Ultimately, this whole fascination comes back to us, to our human need to understand, to find meaning, especially when things feel uncertain.
So maybe we should view these prophecies less as roadmaps to the future and more as reflections of human anxieties and hopes across time.
I think that's a very insightful way to approach them, as cultural artifacts that tell us more about ourselves than about the specific date the world might end.
Okay, so looking ahead, whatever happens when the time comes for a new pope, we can pretty much guarantee one thing.
The speculation will start all over again. People will connect the new pontiff, whoever they are, back to Nostradamus, back to Malachy.
It's just what we do. We try to fit new events into old stories to make sense of them.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church, this ancient institution, just keeps going, navigating its path through a changing world.
And whether that path leads towards decline, like some read in the prophecies, or towards some kind of, I don't know, renewal or transformation, well, we'll have to wait and see.
The story isn't over. The next chapters are still unwritten.
Makes you think, though, doesn't it? How much our own views, our own hopes or fears color how we interpret these kinds of predictions. Are we seeing what's there or what we expect to see?
That's the perennial question with prophecy, isn't it? A fascinating thought to leave things on.